Let's walk through our reasoning path for understanding and discovering God. We begin with the cosmological argument, or the argument from causality, the idea that everything has a cause. Now, when we trace causes backward, we end up with only four possible options. 1. The universe came into existence from absolute nothingness. 2. The universe is the result of an infinite, linear chain of causes. 3. A necessary being, meaning a God separate from existence, initiated this linear sequence. 4. Causes are not linear at all. Instead, they form a cycle, which is the totality of existence, or God. Our goal is to rule out the first three, so that we can arrive at the fourth.
Right from the start, you have to show that every phenomenon has a cause. Maybe some phenomena arise completely without a cause, and in fact, we might already see hints of this in modern science.
In reality, every phenomenon does have a cause, but sometimes that cause is hidden from us, and we'll touch on this later when we talk about quantum entanglement. But here's my reason for rejecting the idea of uncaused phenomena. Our universe functions as one large, interconnected system. Everything in existence is linked and in motion. A system like this can survive and grow only when the law of balance and order governs it. No system can endure purely by chance or without balance. It would collapse immediately. An uncaused phenomenon implies randomness and lawlessness. But we see that our universe has endured and continually grows, so it cannot be based on chance or uncaused events. A clear example is our own body, which, on a smaller scale, functions like a universe. Could things in the body change for no reason, and yet the body remain alive and continue to grow? Of course not. For example, if the oxygen level in our blood randomly dropped or spiked, we would easily face death. So it's logical to accept that every phenomenon has a cause, although the limited human perspective may not always be capable of identifying that cause.
All right, let's begin with the first option. Why can't the universe come from nothing? For example, from vacuum fluctuations.
Look, there is no such thing as nothing that could give rise to existence. Even if you imagine a place with no matter, no energy, no laws, and no time, you still can't call that nothing. Because then we must ask, who is detecting that vacuum?
Well, obviously some kind of intelligence is detecting it.
Exactly. And intelligence itself is a form of being. If intelligence is present there, then that place is no longer absolute nothingness. Even when you imagine an empty space in your mind, you're already giving it form within the realm of your own conscious existence. Reaching nothingness removes it from being nothing. Even when scientists talk about vacuum fluctuations, they never mean absolute nothingness. They mean a kind of boundless sea of forms of existence that merely appears empty to us.
Do you have a more relatable example?
Yes. Look at quantum entanglement. Two particles separated by hundreds of kilometers remain so deeply connected that the behavior of one instantly affects the other. If we only observe one particle suddenly collapsing, we might think it happened without a cause or came from nothing. But the cause exists. It's in the other particle we're not observing. As we said earlier, the universe is an interconnected system. Nothing can occur out of nothing or without a cause. Whatever happens is within existence itself. But because existence has many forms and layers of complexity, some of them appear like nothing to us. Also, notice the term nothingness. It literally means that which is not, that which has no existence. The moment we say, there is a place of nothingness, we've already granted it existence within the wider realm of being, and therefore it can no longer be absolute nothingness.
But your argument has a logical flaw. The fact that my mind cannot imagine nothingness does not mean that nothingness cannot exist in reality. It's like saying, because I cannot experience death, therefore death doesn't exist. That's a fallacy.
That's a good question. But let me ask, should we reason based on what we do know, or based on what we don't know? For example, in medicine, we don't abandon an effective treatment just because there might be some unknown cause that could hypothetically reverse its outcome someday. Until that cause is actually found, our method remains valid. All of our experiences so far have been interactions with being, and everything we once thought was nothing eventually turned out to be some form of existence. Now, if we choose to dim this sun of awareness just because maybe there is some undetectable nothingness somewhere, we are acting irrationally and even harmfully.
All right, so nothingness is ruled out. But why can't the second option be true? Maybe the universe is the result of an infinite chain of causes, one that has no beginning at all.
If that were the case, life would have no meaning. Because such a chain would be connected to nothing. There'd be no foundation beneath it.
Well, maybe life really is meaningless. Maybe we just appeared by chance and will vanish later. Just because we want the universe to have meaning, a psychological argument, doesn't mean it actually does. Philosophers call this the appeal to consequences fallacy. Maybe the universe is meaningless, and it's up to us to build our own meaning.
That statement contradicts itself. First, if the universe is inherently meaningless and absurd, then where did our rationality come from? Our reason is a product of this universe. If the universe is meaningless, then our reasoning must also be an illusion. Second, we cannot build a safe corner for ourselves inside a universe that is inherently meaningless. Can a living fetus grow inside the womb of a dead mother? Of course not. If the very womb of existence, the universe, is dead or meaningless, then we, the fetus, cannot have meaningful life inside it.
But maybe I can imagine that the universe has meaning, even if it doesn't. Like a placebo effect.
There's a huge difference between actually drinking poison and merely imagining drinking it. You can imagine drinking poison without being harmed, but if you truly drink it, you'll definitely get hurt. Someone who genuinely and consistently sees the world as meaningless and truly believes that cannot continue living for long without collapsing internally. So it's a mistake to assume that our subconscious relies on meaning, yet outwardly claim that the world is meaningless, and then think that because we can still go on living with this idea, it must mean there's no real meaning in the world. The very flow of life within us is evidence that the foundation of the world is meaningful. Let me give another example. Imagine a light bulb with two wires extending from it infinitely, but not connected to any power source. Would the bulb turn on? No. Life in our world is lit, which means those wires cannot extend to infinity without being connected to something. And that tells us that an infinite linear regress contradicts the very basis of our lived experience.
Maybe we're like cancerous cells inside a dead body, still alive for a while, but destined to die eventually.
Maybe that's the case, and maybe it's not. We have no decisive evidence either way, because we cannot step outside our own boundaries to see whether the thing we're inside of is alive or dead. But the real question is, what should a healthy and rational human choose in such a situation? Obviously the choice that is life-giving and hopeful, not the one that leads to self-destruction. Imagine if humanity, 500 years ago, had chosen to believe the view you just proposed. What would have happened? All of humanity would have collapsed, and you and I wouldn't even be here now having this conversation. The fact that humanity survived these 500 years is itself evidence that choosing hope and meaning was the right choice. We should choose what they chose.
But you still haven't mathematically disproven infinite regress. You've only said that if we don't reject it, life becomes impossible.
Can you mathematically disprove the existence of a two-headed dragon? No. But does that mean belief in it is justified because math can't rule it out? Of course not, because we have no experiential evidence for it. Let me clarify something else. In discussing the existence of meaning, we must consider both sides of the equation. First, meaning that exists potentially in the universe. Second, an intelligent being capable of perceiving and discovering that meaning. If someone lacks the necessary intelligence, they cannot discover meaning even if they are swimming in an ocean of it. For example, imagine a human who has grown up entirely in the forest among animals, with no contact with other people. If we show him a bar of gold and ask whether he finds it valuable, he won't. To him, a gold bar is no different from a rock. Although he's honest in seeing no value, his judgment isn't correct or valid. Many people today sincerely say that they see no meaning in life based on their personal experiences, and for them, it's logical to accept a meaningless world. But their view is not valid on a larger scale, because many others have perceived and discovered meaning all throughout the universe. If the universe were truly meaningless, then no one should be able to find meaning anywhere.
All right, let's assume there must be an origin. Why shouldn't we accept the third option? A necessary being who exists outside this universe and pressed the start button on this linear chain. That's the traditional concept of God.
This idea makes God incomplete. If God is separate from the world, it means the world is something outside of God. So God doesn't encompass everything and is therefore limited. If the world has value and God doesn't have that value because he is separate from it, then God isn't perfect. If God is separate, then he becomes dependent, because he must constantly watch over the world to give reward and punishment. If he is only the first cause, then where is he now? He would no longer be present in our space and time. And if we say God manages the world through angels or through laws he has imposed on the universe, then he is no longer the direct ruler of the world. His deputies are ruling instead. In this view, God's attributes fall apart, and we no longer have a God worthy of worship.
But philosophers say the world is a reflection or manifestation of God, not something added to him, like an image in a mirror.
Exactly, that's the point. Does an image in the mirror have any meaning without the presence of the one being reflected? If we capture someone's image and place it on top of a mountain, wouldn't it become meaningless and worthless? An image only has meaning with the presence of its source. What we reject is a God who is separate from his creation, like a builder who constructs a house and walks away, not a God who flows within his creation.
So we reach the fourth option, that God is the total existence and the universe is a cycle. Please explain how this works.
In this view, the chain of causes, or the layers of existence before our universe, aren't linear. Together, they form an enormous cycle that we call the total existence. Everything that has ever been, is, or will be. God is this total existence. He is present everywhere, because everything that exists is him. He is self-sufficient, because nothing exists outside of him that he could depend on. He is just, because he cannot oppress himself. He is self-originating, because there is no cause outside the total existence that could bring it into being. The total existence appears in countless forms that constantly transform into one another. This is the equivalent of creation, taking life and giving life again, the processes we attribute to God.
This picture is fascinating, but I have a few major questions. First, where is God in relation to time? How does he create himself over time?
Time is a mental construct created by humans, arising from motion. If there were no motion, there would be no time. For God, the total existence, where nothing exists outside of him to create motion and thereby produce time, time is always the present. That means he has no temporal limitations like we do. He is both inside time and beyond it. However, within the cycle of the total existence, meaning from our perspective as a tiny part of it, time ultimately becomes cyclical, because motion, which generates time, is itself circular in this vast cycle. This means the past eventually reaches the future, and the future returns to the past. In reality, no matter where we stand in the cycle and search for God, we will find him. And if we go further, we realize it was he who had created himself earlier. It's exactly like walking toward the south on a spherical Earth. When you reach the South Pole and keep walking, you'll automatically find yourself moving toward the north again, as if the path to the North Pole leads back to the South Pole, and vice versa.
Second question. Now, please tell me about God's attributes like compassion and love. Where do they come from?
Human beings are the only intelligent creatures who have managed to discover God. Because we see God through a human lens, we attribute qualities such as love, justice, and wisdom to him, qualities we ourselves possess and deeply value. Since God, or the total existence, is the source of everything, he must also be the source and ultimate owner of these highest qualities. For example, if a mountain were trying to describe God, it would praise him as the tallest and strongest. So, once we consider the proportional distance between the discoverer, humans, and the one discovered, God, it becomes clear why we attribute these qualities to him. On the other hand, the continued existence of this vast and complex total existence can only be explained by pure goodness. If the ultimate source were evil or flawed, this entire enormous system would have collapsed long ago. That too is a reason to associate qualities derived from absolute goodness with God.
Fine, but doesn't identifying God with existence itself limit him?
No, because existence here does not just mean galaxies. The total existence is boundless. Long ago, humans thought existence was just their city. Later they thought it was the Earth, then the galaxy. But that is not the end. The total existence is infinitely vast. And it's important to note that the universe humans currently imagine is, compared to the total existence in our argument, like a single grain of sand compared to all the sand on Earth.
So, where did this cycle itself come from? What created it?
This question is flawed. It's like a cell in your body asking, where is the Milky Way located? And wanting to know whether it's north, south, east, or west. If you told the cell that no matter which direction it moves, it's still inside the galaxy, that would sound meaningless to it, because it has no concept of how small it is compared to the galaxy. Even if you gave it the full scientific answer, it would be incapable of understanding, because it doesn't fully comprehend the body it inhabits, let alone a galaxy. Our situation is similar. Once we grasp the magnitude of what we're dealing with, we realize we don't have the capacity to understand the origin of the total existence. The question is an empty illusion created by our mind. The further we go, the more we confront an endless expanse of being that contains all reasons within itself. Any cause for the total existence would first have to exist, and if it exists, it already lies within the total existence itself. So nothing outside of it can create it. That's why we say it is self-originating and self-sustaining.
All right, I understand. But the next issue is this. If God is just and everything is God, then what about all the evil, injustice, and suffering in the world?
Evil has no independent external existence. It's a mistaken human perception, like when you spin around and think the room is spinning. If evil were real in its own essence, it would have destroyed this interconnected universe long ago, because evil is, by nature, destructive. The universe is a system of pure goodness. What we perceive as evil is either our lack of understanding or something required for growth, but in its essence, evil does not exist. Of course, the topic of evil is not this simple, and it can be understood much better in discussions on divine justice and death.
But isn't the idea of a cyclical universe meaningless, like spinning in place?
No. Imagine walking on Earth's surface. It looks flat, and the farther you walk, the farther you seem to get from your starting point, apparently losing your way. But eventually, because it's a sphere, you return to the same place and realize you were never lost. You were always on the Earth. The cycle of existence is itself an eternal meaning in which we discover infinite forms of meaning. Whenever we appear to face meaninglessness, if we continue further, we rediscover meaning, because we are always held within that eternal meaning. And consider breathing. It seems repetitive, but every breath gives us precious life.
Does this total existence also have will and personality, or is it just a massive system?
Yes. Think of the total existence like the human body, which contains billions of cells. Together, those cells create a unified intelligence, you, that governs the whole body. God is that intelligence and life force that governs the entire structure of existence. When you look inside a human body, you don't find personality or will. You only see a vast and organized system. But outside the body, there exists a single being who possesses all that complexity, and who has both will and personality. The same applies to the total existence. Viewed from within, it appears to be a gigantic, interconnected system, but when seen as a whole, it reveals a being with personality and will. In fact, all positive human qualities, like will, decision-making, and purpose, reflect God, who possesses their supreme form.
But isn't this blasphemous, saying that you and I are parts of God?
No. If we consider relativity, the issue becomes clear. Who creates the rain? The clouds. But are the clouds fundamentally different from the water that falls as rain? No, they are essentially the same substance in two different forms. From one perspective, we can say the water on Earth creates the clouds. From another, that the clouds create the water. This is the very idea of cycle and relativity. It depends on which viewpoint you choose, because your angle of perception deeply affects what you see. In our definition, the total existence constantly transforms into countless forms of itself. But from the limited perspective of most humans within this vast existence, it appears as though a separate creator is sitting somewhere, producing these phenomena.